here constantly, talking to chat anyway. I have been kind of having an issue with that on and off over the past week. But outside of that, let's let her rip. Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you're doing well. Today it's time for an exciting and exclusive interview with the one and only Stu Mackenzie of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. Really one of the bands that I think I've consistently reviewed the most over the past 10 years. So this is, kind of been like a long time coming, something I and a lot of the fans who follow me have been excited to see. Stu, thank you for coming through. Let us know how you're doing.
Of course, man. Yeah, howdy, Anthony. Thanks for having me. I'm doing good. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. We've been on tour for month and a half, having fun time. Just got back from Mexico, about to hit some Midwest shows. Everything is good. We're back on the road. This is like real life.
How is, this post-COVID tour, sort of COVID, there's still numbers out there, but tour looking? I mean, I had the pleasure of being able to see you guys before all of that had hit. I believe it was, around the time that you guys did, the Fishies record. And that show was wild, and there were tons of people there. I mean, is everything pretty much kind of feeling the same? Have you guys been able to get back into the groove since, or has it been a little slow going?
We played a small amount of sporadic Australian shows through the pandemic. Every time we had a little window in our lockdowns, we tried to play. But what was that? I don't know. Maybe that was 15 shows. It wasn't many. Maybe it was 20, something like that. So we did very much feel out of practice. But at the same time, there was this kind of sensation of, I suppose, grief or loss, or feeling like we'd worked the majority of our whole lives worked on being a live band, and like the interplay between us and learning how to even travel and like just be good at, or as good as we could be at our instruments, and sort of to take that away did feel like a piece of our soul had been ripped. To be able to do it again, it does feel double. And so there is a sort of thing with a push-pull of feeling, but it's so home. Like it just feels so comfy to be back performing and just playing together, even just rehearsing together. Comfy again.
Over that course of time that you speak of, you guys did stay like pretty active in terms of output and everything. Would you say that it, either in a negative way or just really any way at all, that this period and this kind of separation that you guys had to go through in a way, affected the creative output that you had going at the time?
So we had, I guess if I think back to pre-pandemic, we had a few projects on the go. One of them was this kind of microtonal idea.
Yeah.
And we had a few recordings kind of kicking around, and it was going to just be this piecemeal thing. And we're just going to piece it together as we went in the studio, and we had some time between tours, blah, blah, blah. But when the pandemic hit, it was like, fuck, we've started this album. What the fuck are we going to do? Let's try to finish it. So, what that meant was all of us set up a little bedroom studio. About half of us in the band had done a lot of that type of stuff before, and about half hadn't done as much. And the nice thing was it meant that every single person had to learn how to record and like learn how to use a computer and like be a 21st century like adult human and shit. And so that was a cool learning experience. And one nice anecdote is Cavs, the drummer, for the very first time, like learning how to mic up his drum kit, getting really sick sounds in his garage, and doing stuff that I would never do to his drum kit, and, just making it different on purpose. And so, KG and LW was kind of formed out of that, which we thought were making one album. We kind of made two. And I think it was like, we have to lean into this process of just not being able to be together. So we mostly recorded those two records separate from each other. And that was hard. But I think it kind of defined those two records. And then by the time we got around to Butterfly 3000, it was like, okay, we've figured out how to record music separately. Let's lean into this thing. Let's make something more electronic than we've ever done. It feels right. It feels like a fight medium or genre. So I don't know. There's some personal growth in there. I think that's like need when you feel like something's being taken away.
I mean, you know, again, still like over that course of time, you guys didn't really skip a beat in terms of like dropping an output and kind of like staying engaged with your audience. Like, you know, looking back on the over 10 years that it's been since you guys have formed, like, you know, if you could put it in a word, like to what would you attribute the fact that over this course of time, you guys have like put out a catalog that, I don't know, some bands and artists like will wait 20 or 25 years to put out. You know, you guys like managed to drop it in like 12 in terms of like the amount of records and the versatility and the bases covered. Like you guys just kind of creatively speaking, like seemingly evolved so quickly over such a short span of time.
Thanks, man. That's very kind words. I don't know. Like I like to record, you know, right. We like to record. It's when the band started, it was a few things, but one thing that King Gizz was when it first started was a recording project. And it was kind of, you know, before we even released any recordings, it was kind of like, well, and a lot of the first songs that I wrote, because as well, like in general, before King Gizzard or whatever, because I was always a sideman. Sorry, I'm like telling two stories at once here, but I grew up playing music. I wanted to be like the Malcolm Young. Like I wanted to do like the rhythm guitar and like I wanted to play the drums on the guitar. You know, that was kind of my thing. And I was always a sideman and I liked that. And I liked playing that role. But I think the earliest songs that I ever wrote, I wrote them because I was starting to get interested in recording music, and I would write something because I just wanted an excuse to record something. And I think I fell in love with that process more than any other aspect of being a musician for some reason. And that kind of love has spread out to what we do in King Gizz a lot of the time, which is record as a group. But it's not just that. It's like recording by myself, recording as a group, mixing other people's records. I just fucking love that process. Like there's something about how you can create something out of nothing, like truly nothing, and you can create something tangible. I just like it, you know, and I just feel kind of like endlessly motivated to write stuff so that I can get it out on the page.
I mean, you may have been asked this before, but is there ever a point where you or anybody else in the band feels close to like a point of burnout or anything like that, especially through that like 2017 period?
I definitely did feel it then. I have felt close to being, you know, in that sort of state of mind, I would say several times. But I also just try to center myself and remind myself that I'm like a musician for a job. And if I complain, I'm kind of like an asshole, you know. It's like a privilege to be able to do this as a full-time job. It really is. And I feel very grateful to not have a real job, because it's kind of just like what I didn't want to have a real job. Like I wanted to like make art and like just build shit and make stuff. Hang out with my friends, travel the world, tour. And so you won't hear me complaining about like working. You know, I feel to have a job.
You know, let me ask you if this is something you have to kind of almost force yourself into the mindset of, given how active, you know, you guys are in terms of your output. Because with each record, you know, it's very obvious, especially with the newest one here, that you guys are very conscious of the fact that, or very conscious of where you've been in the past, you know, creatively. Like you're working actively to not necessarily prevent yourselves from repeating yourselves, but like you're always trying to head into a new direction or something. Like, do you allow yourself in these short spans of times between records the ability to kind of take in the impact of what you've created and done so that you can actually like reflect on it? Or as soon as you're done with the record, do you often find yourself pushing like, okay, I'm on to the next thing. I got to do the next thing?
I think that process that you're talking about happens when you tour, because you meet people, you talk to people, you play in front of people, and you see the songs that connect, I suppose, like in that sense. It's like, it's humbling to be able to just like play shows every night and for people to rock up. You know, it is. I wouldn't say I actively spend a lot of time like thinking about our back catalog, but I suppose, yeah, there is. I'm trying to articulate like what's in my mind. I think the one thing that I have actively tried to do is not repeat ourselves too much, because it makes it it makes it easier to motivate yourself, because I feel like I'm not being judged on my past work, because my past work is so different. If I can make something different every time, it's kind of like uncritiquable. I mean, you're the critic, you know what I mean? It's like, because I'm not trying to better. I've never tried to better myself. I've never tried to say, I'm going to make the best record I've ever made. I've never tried to say, I'm going to write the best song I've ever written, because I will do nothing if I say that to myself. I will like go hide under my bed and cry, you know, like I'll never do anything. So I've always just tried to sidestep. It's just, every record is just a sidestep. And if something great happens, amazing. If something unusual happens, amazing. Something I didn't expect to happen happens, amazing. And that's kind of the goal.
You know, what do you think generally of that opposite ethos in terms of consistency? Because, you know, you bring up Malcolm Young earlier in terms of like, you know, almost like an inspiration. But, you know, AC/DC is like notoriously one of the most consistent bands of all time. You know, pick a record from any era, it has a particular vibe to it. You know, it's like, do you feel any more or less of a connection to other bands that you may listen to who maybe go more of that path, where they kind of are sort of dead set on a certain sound and they stick to their guns and just kind of follow through with it?
I mean, AC/DC are one of my favorite ever records, which similar to each other for sure. Like unarguably similar. Did not follow the ethos that I'm talking about. Yeah. And I respect that, but I could never do that, because it would fine. Like, imagine when Bon Scott died and they decided they were going to make Back in Black. Like, that would just be so fucking terrifying. That's just not me. I would never be able to do that. It's very brave.
So, you know, one of the excuse me, geez. Ugh. God, embarrassing. Sorry. Can't help it. I wish I could. You know, one of the defining characteristics that kind of makes each King Gizzard record stand out, or at least a good deal of them, you know, which a lot of fans know, are the concepts that you guys kind of have, you know, behind a lot of these records. You know, when it comes to the demos, the recordings, the formation of these concepts within your mind or the collective mind of the band, like, how often do you find your guys sitting on these? How often do you guys find yourself sitting on these ideas and kind of developing them before we actually see them? Like, is it, you know, merely happening in the time between records, or, you know, albums like, for example, you know, Murder of the Universe or like Infest the Rat's Nest? Are you sitting on those ideas for like maybe years until they're kind of like developed to a point where you're happy with them?
I was actually thinking about this really recently. I think we still probably average around 2 years, and sometimes it's much longer. I've been trying to finish this fucking record that we started in 2017, and I just can't finish it. And it's not because it's more technical or more progressive or more lyrically challenging or virtuosic or anything than before. It's just, I can't finish it. Like, I don't know. I keep being distracted by other things, or there's a song that I know is going to be great. I just can't figure out what it needs. Like, I don't know. I like having concurrent projects. There's always concurrent projects. Some, of course, come together quicker than others. That's definitely true. But I would say the most common thing that happens is that, so I would say we're always doing one of two things. We're always the obvious one is that we're finishing a record, and it's like that's the kind of process everyone's familiar with. It's like you've already got a few songs, you're just like writing the rest, you're finishing, mixing, like doing all that. But I guess we do spend a lot of time just sort of more in a ethereal kind of like magic sparks kind of way, just writing and like trying stuff and trying to follow through with some idea and see if it leads anywhere. And there sometimes, I would say a lot of the time, one song will define a whole album. So for example, with Infest the Rat's Nest, Planet B was written way before all of the rest of the songs. And it sat around as this kind of like thrash metal thing, this sort of like, how do we write around this? It was like, is this the heaviest song on a bit of a more of a sort of maybe more of a Murder of the University type thing? Is this like, what is this? And eventually when we sort of had the time and the energy and stuff, we sort of we essentially wrote the entire album around that song. It became, I guess, like the epilogue of the album or whatever. I would say that's the most common way, but it's always some version of that, more or less extreme.
Yeah, I mean, you know, could you ever see your guys like conceptualizing an album around a song that kind of sounds like Plastic Boogie or something like that, you know?
I mean, yeah, like that's kind of the way it always is, but it's always around a new song. It's always like, we have this song, it's weird. It's usually what we say. It's weird. It's like, I don't know what it is. It's weird. It's different. That's what Dreams was from Butterfly 3000. It was the one that kind of came first. And it was like, no, this isn't a song. This is an album. You know, that's usually what happens.
You know, you talk a little bit about concurrent projects and stuff like that, to kind of like dig into that a little bit. You know, how many albums or projects do you often find yourselves like kind of having, maybe hanging around, kind of looking for attention at any given time, you know?
I would say there's always a couple, usually there's usually a couple that are, we know what they are, just got to finish them, sort of spend the time, you know, that's like the work. That's like the bricks and mortar. It's like you've already done the design, the architecture's done. It's like just getting your fucking hands dirty. There's always like that, but there are always more than you sort of know that are just a song that's hanging around or floating around usually. So maybe there's one or two there, but you don't know what they are yet, you know.
You know, creatively speaking, considering like, I mean, King Gizzard is a sizable band. You know, you guys are like steering a really huge ship right now, you know, much larger than some rock bands out there. And, you know, I guess it's surprising with which the ability you guys are able to pivot from like sound to sound and idea to idea from each record. And, you know, when you are going back and like trying to finish a project with a particular sound, like, you know, is it kind of difficult sometimes to get everybody kind of in that mindset or in that direction so that everyone's kind of on the same page to sort of like create or perform or conceptualize this piece of art in a certain way, because it's not going to sound like anything you guys have done before, or it's not sounding like any other project that you're writing at that moment?
So one other thing about King Gizz, which maybe is, some bands that I know operate like this, but not many, is, and this has been something again since the very start, is that it's always been an open door. If anyone in the band has shit on, is making a solo record, is making a record with another project, is just busy, doesn't want to turn up to the studio, can't be bothered, has got something else on, wants to go on a holiday, it's always fine. It's always 100% fine. And so I would say that if you look on the credits of any King Gizzard track, it's always just bizarre. Like, it's always bizarre. Everyone's playing bizarre instruments. Most of the time, there isn't everyone on the song. I would say there aren't actually that many King Gizzard songs where everyone actually plays on the track. That's actually kind of unusual. And then what we do is we just work out the nitty gritty later. It's like, oh yeah, you were more involved in that track, like whatever. We just work out what's kind of fair. And then that's kind of always been, I suppose, like my role within the band is to, maybe it's produce in the old fashioned sense of the word. It's like just curate everyone, keep everyone happy, you know, make sure everyone's creative as creatively want to be and they can be. No one feels like there's I try and involve everybody, some kind of like gentle touch like that, because everyone in the band is a creative person and everyone in the band like has, you know, so many. I think we're pretty good at listening to each other now and just sort of trying to be on the same page, stroking need to stroke an ego, give a hug where you need to give a sort of just, you know, something like that.
You're almost like the RZA of the band.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. Something like that.
All right. I wanted to ask you just on sort of like a personal tip. Or, you know, maybe I'll kind of get into that after. I also wanted to ask you about the recent collaboration that you guys had with Tropical Fuckstorm, who, you know, is also one of my favorite bands out of Australia too. Would you be able to let everybody know how that kind of crossover came together and if maybe there might be more of that coming in the future? Because, like, you know, some of the stuff you guys did on that was banging.
So this is like a really nice sort of, the way this came together was really, really nice, actually. Gareth and Fee, the two of the members from Tropical Fuckstorm, we've known for a long time. They were part of the band The Drones, incredible Australian bands, if anyone doesn't know about them already. Known them a long time. When we were making Fishing for Fishies, they invited us to their house in country Victoria. It's beautiful. They've got dogs. They've got a river like going through that place. They've got a boat. It's sick. We recorded most of Fishing for Fishies out on their farm. Yeah, Gaz recorded most of it. We kind of just did overdubs and that sort of shit. That's how that record came together. But anyway, we had this song, which at the time we were calling Mike Bloomfield Jam. And I think it's sort of because it had this like 60s Dylan Goes Electric sort of like type of vibe in our heads, at least. It did, you know, maybe it didn't really, but that's kind of where we're going with it. And yeah, like, I mean, just a side track for a second. When we're recording, some of it's structured, some of it completely unstructured things where it's like, this isn't even a song. It's just like chord progression. Like, it's not even that. It's just like a fucking whatever. So anyway, when we were finished, we recorded everything. We all ate heaps of food, got kind of drunk, put hats on, being like doofuses and stuff, and just recorded this huge jam. I think there was 3 takes. They're like 10 minutes each. Everyone's just fezzing out their instruments. And it did have like a certain kind of alchemic magic to it. But no one was sure what to do with it, I suppose. So this was back in 2018, when this was recorded. And around the same time, Ambrose and I were kind of like working on this other sort of like melodic song, which was completely unrelated. But anyway, both of those two things, this jam at Gaz and Fee's house was just put aside. And this other song that Ambrose was kind of working on was just put aside. And at some point along the years between 2018 and now, we fused those two ideas together and it became the Tripping Tap. And then that just over time evolved and we would always jam it and eventually recorded it, ended up on Omnium Gatherum. So that's that little side of it. But throughout those years, Gaz would always text me and say, what are you doing with that hat jam? He always called it the hat jam because we had hats on. What are you doing with the hat jam? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I think we're turning in a song Dripping Tap. And Gaz was like, I'm going to overdub on it. I'm going to get the Tropical Fuckstorm crew in. We're going to like do some crazy shit on it. The girls are going to sing. It's going to be sick. And so I just sort of said, you know what? You do you, man. Like, that jam was awesome. I have no idea what to do with it. Whatever you can kind of come up with, I'm down. So basically, Gaz just and the Tropical Fuckstorm crew sort of just like worked their magic on it, and turned it into what it is. And like, in a way, I don't feel like I can take very much credit for it, because like I was kind of just like half tanked, just like noodling on a guitar for 30 minutes, you know what I mean? And like, it's, yeah, the sort of like creative involvement is that for me, and like the rest of King Gizz. And then they've really shaped it into like a real piece of music, and it's a cool way to make music actually, and it's like quite inspiring, to be honest.
No, that's amazing that it just like was this random thing and was kind of left there, and then it was able to kind of come together through what they did to it after the fact.
Totally.
I wanted to ask you a little bit, about Omnium, since it did come up there. I mean, obviously, to kind of get a quick sense of this, I mean, there's a lot of talk about the band being able to come back together for this record and everything like that. I mean, was there anything else other than that reformation that kind of drove you guys into an attitude where creatively we maybe want to kind of look back a little bit, and sort of like touch down on these major kind of sounds and aesthetics that fans kind of remember us for at this point?
We didn't do that on purpose, actually.
I'm surprised, because that's like what I had read so many times in like, emails and stuff like that. So tell me how it did happen.
I think it's a nice narrative to think that that's what happened, but I would personally find that a very hard way to make a record. It's just, I mean, it was kind of simpler than that, really. This was the third time that we've made a record that's like deliberately not cohesive in a liberating way. For us, like, which has been said many times, we like to make records which you can put on from start to finish. They've got a vibe, they've got a feel, they've got a landscape, they've got, a world. It's a world. It's everything has to live inside the world. But it is liberating to kind of not do that from time to time. And just think about songs. And that's the way most people make albums. So,
sure.
Hey, that's normal, I think. But we just don't do it very often. And when we do, it's always very fun. And Oddman's Gumboot Soup and Omnium Gatherum, the 3 times that we've done that, they do have some of my favorite ever songs that I've written, and the band has written, and the rest of the guys have written. There is something about only thinking about the song, which means that the song is the world, and it's just a normal way of like writing songs.
Yeah. I mean, it does kind of put in perspective, like the amount of conceptual albums that you guys have, like, is what, double, triple, quadruple that of what most bands will do over the course of their career. Like, some of the greatest bands of all time have that 1 or 2 concept albums that everybody goes back to. Is like, yeah, that's the one, whereas like you guys are like kind of striking that iron successfully, again and again and again.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We just it's not like we think of it like that. Like, it's just what we know, and I personally find it easier to write like that. Actually, I think the way I would visualize it is putting a box around something. This album kind of like has constraints. Every album that we make has constraints on purpose, and it makes it easier to make creative decisions. It makes it quicker to finish a song too, because you have less options. So you just explore inside the box, and you don't have to kind of like do this whole soul searching thing that so many people do before they make a record. We just go, all right, we're going to fucking put our record there. It's going to have, these are the parameters, and let's see what we can make inside that.
Yeah. It's going to work and what's not, just based on the concept.
Right.
But, with this new LP, while there are a lot of familiar sounds on it, there are a lot of what a lot of fans and I myself see as kind of some newer sounds as well on the record too. I mean, given what you're saying about how some songs become entire records, are there any things that you do on this LP that you could foresee the band kind of diving into a certain style or vibe more for the length of an entire album, be it something maybe with more of a Latin feel or even more hip hop tracks, honestly?
I'd say it could happen. We did start making this record. One thing that we did during the pandemic was, this may surprise several people, but I've never owned a turntable until the pandemic.
Nice.
So I bought a turntable, and I started buying like dollar bin world music LPs just from Discogs. And it was like, just, I don't know, it was a fucking lockdown activity. I was like, I'm gonna try and get my head around chopping up samples and like figure out how to do this MPC shit. Like, I don't understand that. So I want to try and let's see what we can make. And so I spent an extraordinary amount of time doing that, and it was insanely fun. And it's funny, I wasn't so much thinking about hip hop, although I naturally was, because I mean, it's a hip hop culture to do that. But I was truly looking at it with an open mind and just seeing what kind of music would come out if that happened, you know, and it all sounded like fucking hip hop. I don't know. It's like, maybe it's just my bias or like what I've heard before, but yeah, started kind of making these songs out of like chopped up records. Eventually Cookie got the bug as well and started doing it. And Joe's done it a lot before as well. So, like, naturally just in it and like cheering us on. But anyway, Kepler 22b, the Grim Reaper, and Sadie Sorceress, all three of those have their genesis in just like being chopped up samples and trying to figure out how to make music like that. And at one point we did think it was going to be an album that was going to be separate to Omnium Gatherum. And maybe that was before we even had a name for Omnium Gatherum. It was just like, we've got this collection of songs over here, living over here. We've got this sort of like sample based thing over here. And I don't know, like it didn't feel like an album, you know? So we joined forces, and it sort of felt like, oh, this makes Omnium Gatherum make even more sense. It's like broadening the scope of this record. And yeah, with the metal kind of like, there's a couple of kind of like heavier tracks on there. And I think they're both, I mean, you know, like I think on one hand, they're tonally maybe similar to Infest the Rat's Nest, but in my mind, they're really different because they're kind of like, they're both rhythmically so different. And I think that's what we were trying to do with both of them. It was like, Gaia was kind of built around this quite unusual drum beat, which doesn't sound metal. And it was like, let's try and make this sound as heavy as we can. And yeah, I don't know. And then like Predator X is, I suppose, trying to be something different again that we hadn't done before, maybe slower or heavier than we ever have, maybe in a different way.
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of the defining characteristic of both those tracks for me outside of like Infest. They're both much heavier than what you guys were doing on that record. Like it felt more to me like less Metallica and more like High on Fire or something like that, you know, like more of a sludge thing almost.
Yeah, that's dope. And I love High on Fire, and like that's, yeah, maybe there is that thing in there. So yeah, I don't know. I suppose like, yeah, going back to the reason this album exists is to just try something for a song. It was like, if we have to make a whole album of Gaia, it's like, I don't know. I don't think I feel ready for that yet, but maybe one day.
Yeah. You know, just to kind of quickly reverse on the MPC thing really quickly, like, you know, I understand like a good pandemic activity for sure. You know, like you did it, you tried it, you sort of got like enough of a feel for the process to be able to, you know, like make a song that you guys were proud of and put on a record. Like, you know, now that you kind of have some distance from that, do you feel a pull back to that process personally in any way or at any point? Like, are you like, man, I got to get back on the MPC, or like, I'm here in this loop and would make a cool beat idea? Like, do you find yourself in that headspace ever? Or do you kind of just find yourself more in, you know, maybe more of a Gaia place or like a, you know, a Kepler place, like creatively?
I actually do feel the pull to the MPC. It's also because I bought a lot of records that I haven't listened to. I was trying to go for maximum $3, which meant that like I just bought so many fucking albums.
The limitations. You're like, okay, I have a rule. This cannot be. It's got to be less than this.
It's less than $3, and it couldn't be in English.
It could be okay. All right.
And so, I mean, that's still a lot of records, you know.
No, absolutely. No, I just love that. again, the consistency of that you go into a certain thing with like, there's got to be something or I'll be overwhelmed. There's got to be some kind of limitation so that I'm not like going off the rails here. Totally.
So anyway, that's kind of how they came together. I would love that headspace. I can't do it on tour, unfortunately. And yeah, I think, I don't know. I sort of like feel a pull to everything at the same time. It's like, it's kind of just about what's being to the rest of the guys in the band as well. Like where's the kind of where's the pull? Like where's the focus? Like where's the most just vibinest thing? And sometimes you'll do that. You only finish half the record. You go do something else, like work on something that's just like follow the party.
You know, again, it's interesting kind of like seeing how when you approach certain records or approach certain things, like you will sort of implement a limitation there in order to kind of like get through that process. But simultaneously, like what King Gizz does generally, it seems like there's so few limitations, you know, in terms of like what you guys will attempt to do or try. Like knowing what you know about yourself creatively and the band, because obviously they're going to be involved in it as well at the end of the day. Like, is there any kind of record or sound that you feel like King Gizzard wouldn't do? Like just to, you know, as just like as a baseline, or do you feel like it's from this point just still pretty open-ended?
It feels like it feels wrong to sort of like mentally go there.
Right.
You know,
probably. Yeah.
It's, of course, like, I don't know, of course there's shit I wouldn't do, but when I think about saying reggae or something, which I like, I'm gonna make a reggae album tomorrow. Like I want to say that, but then I think, well, fuck, I don't know. Like maybe I will be in a headspace where I'll like want to do that at some point. And I fucking told Anthony Fantano I wasn't going to do it in 2022. Like, fuck, you know.
Like if you told me in 2022 I'm never making a fucking reggae record, if you all of a sudden turned up with like an authentic, fantastically produced like dub album, I would I mean that's one of my favorite genres. I would not fault you. You know, it's like the power of dub is too great to like, you know, deny it. So if you were ever tempted by that at some point, I couldn't hold that against you. Even if you promised me a million times right now, I'm never making a reggae record, Anthony. I'm never making a reggae record.
Yeah, maybe one day. It would be fun. I do love reggae.
No, but again, answering that way does say a lot about your process, though. You know, the fear that you're like, well, you know, I actually kind of don't want to go there. You know, it does say a lot about your process and how you see the band in general. You know, as long as you have a firm idea of what you want to do, it seems like you could do whatever it is that kind of comes to you.
I would like to think so. I think it's nice as an artist to think in those idealized terms, because it's not the way your brain works. Like your brain is full of like doubt and fear and self-doubt and all of these things. And if you can kind of shield yourself from as much of that as possible, you'll get the most amount of work done.
I would be remiss if I ignored the chat here. They are repeatedly asking about the or a Christmas album. Is that still like a thing at the moment?
It's so funny. Like it's never been a thing. But like, again, I don't want to say we'll never do a Christmas album, but I'm sorry guys, like we don't have current plans to make any form of Christmas album.
Okay.
I have joked and almost seriously considered releasing an album on Christmas many times, including Gumboot Soup, which was supposed to be finished by Christmas but wasn't finished in time. So that's a cool little gift. Hate religion and consumerism. Christmas is the ultimate like fusion of those two things. So, you know, unlikely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm sorry. Chat is just blown away by that, but thank you very much. Hey, at least we kind of got the answer. At least like in a little bit of a way, that was like an answer to the last question. I was like, hey, are you going to do the Christmas? No, we're not. There's no plans. Yeah. We're not doing a Christmas album.
I should have just said that. That would have been amazing.
Sorry, I that made me forget what the fuck my next question was going to be. Fuck. Maybe it'll come back to me. Let me ask you personally. There were multiple people wanting me to ask you because I am of this, kind as well. We're the same in this way. Veganism. You're vegan. When did you get into the vegan lifestyle and like what's your kind of philosophy and approach with that? If you're open to talking about it,
No,
it's
I am.
probably not something that you blab about too much, but like know you're saying it to a fellow vegan as well. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate like anyone that I meet that is vegan or vegetarian or even just is conscious of like their animal intake, because it's not always an easy thing to do, but it is. It's like it's fucking hard to do sometimes, but you just do it.
especially on the road, I imagine.
It is, especially on the road. But you just, I mean, I don't know. My philosophy is, I just feel like it's the right thing to do, and like I think a lot of my personal life decisions are driven by like being guilt. I think a lot of people in the world are, and maybe I'm not as the mental gymnastics that other people are. Like, 'cause no one wants to fucking hurt an animal. Right. You know what I mean? But I think people are very good at just convincing themselves that it's fine. And maybe like because I'm just like, I don't know, I'm a little bit more sort of, I just think about things in a very black and white way. It's just the way my brain works, a blessing and a curse. And I just like, I'm trying to mitigate guilt. Like that's my primary motive that I've realized over the course of being vegan. My primary motive is actually just mitigating guilt. But I do care very much about animals. I do care very much about planet Earth, which I think was my initial primary motive, was getting my mind around the fact that we probably can't all live on this earth and eat as much meat as we do. And that it's probably like the single easiest thing that humans could do to like reduce greenhouse gases is just to stop eating meat. I think that was my first primary objective. It's never been about health for me ever. I know it is for some people, but it never has been for me. I don't know. It's kind of fun. It's like you get to experiment with food. You had to think about food more. I don't know what else. Yeah, that's my take.
I vibe with kind of what you said there about the mental gymnastics thing, because without having applied that term to it before, that's kind of how I think about it as well. Because what I've kind of learned over the years about like the greenhouse gases, the effects, the way factory farming kind of works, I'd have to be doing a lot of like, weird hierarchical justifications of like, well, we're humans and blah, 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 blah. And I can't bring myself to do that. There'd be too much like cognitive dissonance going on in my head to sort of like continue on like that. And, as like much effort and thought as kind of eating this way can require of you, it's a lot more effort to kind of just like trick myself into thinking it doesn't matter, and, maybe in a way I'm like saving myself mental anguish by just kind of doing it this way.
That's like literally my thought process as well. I think the mental gymnastic thing, it's like human superpower. It's a strength, actually. It can be a strength, and it's the same as kind of, it's a version of compartmentalizing in my opinion. And it's sort of, it's what allows humans to do insane things, is because we can convince ourselves that like that real isn't real. And it's a power, but I suppose like it's a power that I would like to know when I'm using that power and not just blindly not understand the world. That's just my personal take. But yeah, I also, on top of that, my wife, who I met over 10 years ago now, was vegan when I met her. And I was kind of just vegetarian at the time. And so that was a big motivating factor. What else? I also have my own like sort of health things that I've fucked with for like most of my life, where I have to like exclude some foods. I've had a few allergies and things like that. So I feel like cutting out foods was never hard. It's something that I've like done my whole life. And so maybe that's something that kind of has made it easier for me, or like not a big deal, maybe.
Got it. Yeah. I guess like in terms of like just kind of making sure that you're on like a good path and a good diet, was the transition into veganism from vegetarianism, or just from like being an omnivore difficult for you at first? Or, you know, did it take like a while to kind of get to that point where you kind of are at this point now where you sort of know what you want and you know it is kind of a part of your regular diet and you just kind of seek that out?
In a good flow, and I don't really think about it day to day anymore. It just happens.
Right. Yeah, no, it eventually does feel like that. Like you just stop. I guess that's the question. Like, how long did it kind of take you to just not think about it anymore? It just became second nature.
I would say like a couple of years, like a good couple of years. Yeah, a good couple of years. You do have to think about eating healthy though, because you can eat vegan and like not eat very healthy. Like that's still pretty easy. Like potato chips are vegan most of the time, you know, so right. It's pretty easy to just eat junk food still.
You're inadvertently calling me out here, but go on.
No, but you know what I mean. Like it's still like, it doesn't, I think maybe this is less of a thing now than it was, you know, 10 years ago when I was like sort of starting to get into this. I think people thought that you did it for health and that like you just ate vegetables. And like maybe people don't think that so much anymore. I mean, a lot of like, I would say a good portion of the time, the vegan alternatives are probably less healthy. Or vegan like meats or like vegan cheeses and shit that are made out of like oil and stuff. Like it's probably not like good for you, but you're not like killing something. I don't know. You understand.
No, I do. You know, so you guys are in the midst of this tour right now. Like how far along are you? And, you know, for anybody who hasn't made, you know, their way to buying a ticket or anything yet, like, you know, where do they kind of seek that out and, you know, sort of get ready to see you guys? Like where are you hitting next?
We are, we've just been on a big US tour, mostly on the West Coast. Then we hit Mexico. We're there for the last 2 weeks. We've just gotten back from Mexico. We're in Cleveland. We're about to play here tomorrow. We do 7 shows in the Midwest, and sort of wind our way to Boston. We do Boston Calling, that festival, in a couple of weeks. Then we fly to Athens. We do a couple of shows in Athens. Then we fly over to Spain and play Primavera and do some club shows around Barcelona. And then a few days around Europe. Kind of wraps up this tour. We have a few US shows after that, which are Bonnaroo, a couple shows in Miami as well. This tour in particular is very weird, actually, because it consists of us mostly trying to make good on promises of shows that we committed to during the pandemic. And a lot of the festivals and shows have like changed dates and they're not in line anymore. And like we're hopping continents and like countries quite a lot on this tour, but we did sort of make a call to try and keep as many of the shows as we could, you know? So yeah, we were in Europe through all of August. We play a lot of festivals and a bunch of sort of like headline shows around there. And then we're back in the US in October, maybe into early November. Headline shows, just sort of, we do a big lap of the country. It's going to be sick. It's the biggest tour we've ever done. It's going to be amazing. Looking forward to it very much. Okay. All the shows, looking forward to it. Love touring again. Does feel like an absolute privilege to be here. So very grateful.
Well, I know how, tight the schedule can be. So again, I appreciate you coming through and making the time, and go head out and get the rest that I'm sure you need before the next concert.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure for me.
Yeah, again, thanks for coming through, and hopefully we'll see you again.
I love it.
All right. Bye, man.
See you, mate. Bye.